The restaurant was full of voices, clattering plates and glowing lights from different alien devices. But no one noticed the young human waiter moving between the tables. He wore the same plain uniform every day, carrying trays heavier than his thin arms should manage, yet he never complained. The customers were of many races, some with scales, some with wings, some with voices so loud that the air shook. They spoke in different tongues, sometimes ignoring the translator devices. The waiter walked quietly, setting down drinks, refilling bowls, and picking up scraps that fell to the floor. To them, he was not even a person. He was background, like the walls or the floor. He had learned to move silently. A quick hand under a spilling drink, a steady tray through a crowd, a soft smile when someone dropped a coin by mistake. Most aliens did not look at his smile. Some looked past him as though he was not there at all. Others gave short orders without even facing him. He was not angry. This was his life. He told himself that if he worked hard, he would keep his place on the station. The galaxy was not kind to humans. Few had jobs at all, and most were treated like tools. He accepted this truth, but deep inside, he wished anyone would see him. On the far side of the room, a group of tall, armored warriors laughed loudly, their sharp teeth flashing in the light. One of them slapped the table so hard the bowls jumped. Soup spilled down to the floor. The waiter rushed forward with a cloth, kneeling quickly to clean. No one thanked him. One warrior even pushed his shoulder with a boot, ordering him to hurry. The boy lowered his head, said nothing, and kept working. Around him, conversations rose and fell like waves, but not one word included him. When he carried the empty bowls back to the kitchen, the cook barely noticed either. The cook, a four-armed insectoid, barked orders at him in short clicks. The waiter nodded and hurried, never answering back. He had no family here. He had no one. At night, when his shift ended, he returned to a small storage room where a thin mattress lay in the corner. That was his world. The restaurant, the kitchen, and the silent room where he slept. And yet, every day, he woke up and did the same thing again. But his eyes saw more than anyone realized. He saw the way the warriors always sat near the window, keeping their backs against the wall. He noticed the cloaked traders who met in shadows, whispering while exchanging small silver boxes. He saw the nervous hands of an alien official who often came late at night, eyes darting around as if hiding something. The waiter's ears caught small words, half-finished sentences, strange names that echoed in the air before vanishing. No one thought he listened. No one thought he understood. But he remembered everything. That evening, the air in the restaurant was heavy. A storm outside the station made the lights flicker. The aliens seemed restless, their voices sharper, their demands harsher. The waiter kept moving. He carried a tall glass to a table near the door when he saw something unusual. A small alien child, no taller than his chest, stood near the corner. The child's clothes were torn, his eyes tired. He looked around as though searching for help, but no one cared. The warriors laughed louder. The traders argued. The officials scribbled notes. The child swayed as if his legs could not hold him. No one moved. The waiter's steps slowed. For a moment, he wondered if he should keep walking. Helping might bring trouble. Rules were strict, and kindness was not a safe thing here. But when the child's knees buckled and he nearly fell, the waiter placed his tray down and reached out. He caught the boy before he hit the floor. The child's skin felt cold, his breath weak. The waiter looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. Still, no one looked. He lifted the boy carefully, placing him on a bench near the wall. His hands shook slightly, not from weight but from fear of what others might say. He slipped into the kitchen, grabbed a small bowl of hot soup and a piece of bread. The cook yelled at him, but he ignored it for the first time. He carried the food to the boy and set it in his hands. The child looked up at him with wide, tired eyes, then began to eat. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl. For the first time all day, the waiter felt someone saw him. Someone real. The boy whispered a word he did not understand, perhaps a thank you in another language. The waiter nodded anyway. He did not know this child, did not know why he was alone, but something in his heart told him this was not an ordinary moment. The air seemed heavier, the shadows deeper. Somewhere in the back of the restaurant, the cloaked traders paused in their whispers. One of the warriors turned his head, watching with narrowed eyes. The waiter suddenly felt a chill. He had broken the invisible wall around him. He was no longer unseen. He straightened, his hands still trembling. The child ate slowly, every bite making him stronger. The waiter stood beside him, aware that eyes now followed. Somewhere in the noise of the restaurant, a dangerous silence began to grow. Something had shifted, something small but powerful. And the waiter, who had been invisible all his life, felt the weight of destiny beginning to rest on his shoulders. The boy's small hands shook as he held the bowl, but he kept eating like every bite was life itself. The human waiter stood close, watching carefully. He felt the stares of others on his back. Some aliens only glanced for a moment before returning to their own meals, but a few did not look away. The cloaked traders in the corner whispered more quickly, their eyes darting toward him. One of the armored warriors smirked, showing sharp teeth, and leaned over to his companion. Their laughter was quieter this time, but their eyes followed the human. The waiter wanted to step away, to go back to work as if nothing had happened. But his feet would not move. He knew the child was weak, and leaving him alone might mean he would collapse again. So he stayed. He poured water into a small cup and placed it beside the bowl. The boy drank, his throat dry and desperate. Then he looked up with large glowing eyes, the kind only his species carried, and said something again in his language. The words were soft, but they carried a strange weight. The waiter did not understand, yet somehow he felt the meaning was not small. A shadow fell over the table. The human looked up. A tall figure stood there, covered in heavy cloth from head to toe, a hood hiding the face. The cloaked stranger spoke in a low voice, addressing the child in his tongue. The boy froze, spoon halfway to his lips, then set it down quickly. His hands clutched the edge of the bowl as if holding on to safety. The stranger reached out, but the child pressed closer to the human waiter's side. For a moment, the waiter hesitated. His instincts told him to stay out of it, to bow and walk away, because humans had no power here. Yet his body leaned slightly forward, as if shielding the boy. He did not plan it. It just happened. The cloaked figure paused, then lowered his hand. His hidden eyes shifted to the human, scanning him in silence. Without a word, the figure turned and left the restaurant, his long cloak trailing behind like a dark shadow. The child let out a breath he had been holding. He whispered again, and though the waiter did not understand the words, he knew it was gratitude. A strange warmth filled his chest, but it did not last. He noticed the group of warriors were no longer laughing. They were watching closely now. One muttered something in his own language that sounded like a warning. The cook from the kitchen shouted his name angrily, telling him to get back to work. The human nodded, but before he left, he bent down and whispered softly to the boy, "Eat. Stay strong." The rest of the night, he worked quickly, but his mind was not on the trays or the plates. It was on the child and the cloaked stranger. He wondered who they were. Why had the child been left alone? Why did the stranger leave so easily? Every time he carried food past the corner, he glanced at the boy. The child had finished the soup, now sitting quietly, eyes following the waiter's every step. That silent trust made the human's heart beat faster. Near closing, a new group entered. They were dressed in rich clothing, glowing threads woven into the fabric. They carried themselves with pride, heads held high. The noise of the restaurant dimmed for a moment. Other customers made space quickly. These were not ordinary aliens. Their presence carried power. The leader, tall and stern, scanned the room before his eyes landed on the boy. His face tightened. He stepped forward, calling out in their shared tongue. The child looked up, fear in his glowing eyes. The waiter set down his tray and stood still. The rich alien leader knelt before the boy, checking him quickly. Then, with a slow turn, he looked at the human. For the first time in his life, the waiter felt truly seen. The alien's gaze was sharp, filled with something between suspicion and curiosity. Then, in broken standard language, the alien spoke to him. "You help him?" The human swallowed, his mouth dry. He nodded once. The alien leader studied him for a long moment. Then, to the human's surprise, the leader bowed his head slightly. Not much, but enough to shock everyone in the room. The warriors stopped whispering. The traders froze. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen. No alien ever bowed to a human. It was unthinkable, but it had happened. The leader spoke again, voice strong. "Debt to you." Then he lifted the child in his arms, turning away. The group of richly dressed aliens followed him out of the restaurant. The noise of the room slowly returned, but it was different now. Every eye flicked back to the human waiter. He had become visible. When he returned to the kitchen, the cook glared at him, but did not shout. The insectoid's mandibles clicked nervously, as if unsure how to treat him now. The human washed his hands, but his thoughts spun. A noble alien had bowed to him. A simple act of kindness had done this. He lay awake in his storage room later, staring at the ceiling. Something had shifted in his life, something he could not stop. He did not know that in hidden chambers of the station, the name of the human waiter had already been spoken. The cloaked stranger had reported what he saw. The noble family had marked the debt. The traders had whispered of danger, all from one bowl of soup and one act of kindness. The waiter closed his eyes, unaware that destiny had already started to follow him. The next morning, the restaurant was quieter, but the human waiter could feel something different in the air. Usually, customers shouted orders, laughed too loudly, and never noticed him. Today, their eyes lingered on him longer than before. Whispers passed from table to table, and though he did not understand every language, he knew many of those whispers were about him. He kept his head down, carrying trays as always, but inside his chest, his heart beat fast. Something had changed since the noble alien bowed to him the night before. As he moved between tables, he noticed two cloaked traders sitting closer than usual. They were not eating, just watching him. Their hoods covered most of their faces, but every time he turned, their eyes followed. He tried to ignore it, but unease settled in his stomach. He remembered the stranger who had tried to take the child the night before. Was it connected? The boy was gone now, safe with his family, but the human could not shake the feeling that threads of danger were pulling tighter around him. The insectoid cook barked at him to move faster, to clear dishes and refill cups. Normally, the cook's voice was sharp, without care. Today, however, there was hesitation behind every order. The cook did not yell as much, did not threaten to replace him. It was as if even the kitchen knew he was no longer just invisible. That frightened him more than anything. He had survived by being unseen. Now eyes were on him, and he did not know what those eyes wanted. Later, while wiping down a table near the entrance, a group of armored warriors came in. The same warriors who had mocked him before. Their heavy boots shook the floor, and their laughter boomed. But when one of them passed close to him, instead of pushing him aside like always, the warrior stopped. He stared into the human's eyes. The grin on his face was not kind. It was the grin of someone testing prey. "You," the warrior said in rough standard. "The noble bowed to you." The restaurant went silent for a moment. The waiter froze, cloth still in his hand. He wanted to deny it, to say nothing happened, but the memory of the noble's head dipping before him was too strong. He nodded once, cautious. The warrior's grin widened, but his eyes were hard. "Humans are dirt. Why would a noble bow to dirt?" His hand slammed on the table, rattling dishes. The waiter stayed silent. He knew words would only bring more trouble. The warrior leaned closer, his sharp teeth glinting. "What did you do?" Before the human could answer, another warrior pulled his comrade back, muttering something in their own language. Their eyes never left the waiter, but they sat down. Still, the message was clear. They did not believe a human could earn respect. They wanted to know the truth, and they would not forget him. He tried to focus on work, but every step felt heavier. The whispers grew louder as the day went on. Customers looked at him with curiosity, suspicion, even fear. The human hated it. He longed for the days when no one noticed him, when he was just a shadow in the corner. But those days were gone. That night, after closing, he stayed in the dining hall longer than usual, wiping down empty tables. The flickering lights made long shadows stretch across the floor. He thought he was alone, but then he heard footsteps. Slow, careful, deliberate. He turned to see one of the cloaked traders standing by the door. The figure spoke in a low voice. "You should be careful, human. You are seen now. That is dangerous." The waiter's throat went dry. He wanted to ask who they were, what they wanted, but his voice would not come out. The cloaked trader took a step closer, placing a small silver coin on the nearest table. It glowed faintly, strange markings carved into its surface. "Kindness," the trader said softly, "has a price." Then he turned and walked out, leaving the coin behind. The human stared at it, unsure if it was a gift, a warning, or a trap. He did not touch it. He left it on the table, but sleep did not come easily that night. Every creak of the storage room felt like footsteps approaching. Every whisper of air sounded like someone calling his name. By the next morning, guards patrolled the station corridors more heavily. Rumors spread faster. Some said the human had saved a noble child. Others claimed he had uncovered a secret. A few even whispered he carried a hidden weapon. None of it was true, but lies did not need truth to grow. When he returned to work, he found a message scratched into the wooden counter where he served drinks. "We are watching." His hands trembled as he touched the letters. He looked around, but no one admitted to writing it. The cook pretended not to see. Customers stared and turned away. He worked through the day in silence, but inside his head, questions burned. Who was watching? Why was he important now? What had he really done except give food to a hungry child? Yet deep down, he sensed the truth. The galaxy was not cruel by accident. Power was built on small actions, and one act of kindness had cracked something much larger than he could understand. When night came, he sat on his thin mattress, listening to the hum of the station. He thought of the boy's glowing eyes, of the noble bowing, of the cloaked figure's warning. He was just a waiter. But the universe had noticed him. And once noticed, there was no going back to being invisible. The station never truly slept, but that night the corridors outside the restaurant seemed louder than usual. Soldiers with bright armor marched past in groups, their boots clanging against the metal floors. Officials hurried with tablets in hand, their eyes filled with worry. The human waiter felt the change before anyone told him. Something important was happening, and somehow it was connected to him. When he entered the restaurant, the cook's antennae twitched nervously. The insectoid did not shout like before. Instead, he whispered with quick clicks to another worker, glancing at the human. The waiter carried trays, wiped tables, and served as always, but the weight of eyes followed him. It was no longer just whispers. It was expectation. Near midday, the doors slid open and silence spread across the room. A noble family entered, their robes long and glowing with golden patterns. They walked as if the air itself bent to their will. At the front was the tall, noble leader who had bowed to him before. Behind him were guards, their armor sharp and gleaming, and at the center, held gently, was the same alien boy he had fed. The boy looked stronger now, his face less pale, his eyes brighter. The nobles moved through the restaurant as if it were theirs. Customers lowered their heads, warriors stood from their seats, traders hid their faces. The leader approached the human directly. Every step echoed like thunder in the waiter's chest. He kept his head down, heart racing. The noble stopped before him and spoke in broken standard. "You, human." The waiter nodded slowly, his hands gripping the tray so hard his knuckles turned white. The noble's sharp eyes narrowed. "You gave food. You gave life. My house owes you." He raised a hand, and one of the guards stepped forward, holding a metal insignia. It was small, silver, shaped like a crest with strange curves. The guard placed it on the counter in front of the human. "This," the noble said, "means protection. My name guards you now." The restaurant gasped as one. Never had a human been given a noble's crest. The cook nearly dropped a pot. The warriors stared, confused. Even the cloaked traders stiffened in their seats. The noble looked into the human's eyes as if weighing his soul, then spoke again. "Do not waste this. A debt is not light. A debt shapes destiny." With those words, the noble turned and left with his family, the boy glancing back once, offering the faintest smile before disappearing into the bright hallway. The human stood frozen. His hands trembled as he touched the crest. It felt heavier than it looked. The moment it touched his skin, he felt both pride and fear. Pride, because for once he was not invisible. Fear, because he knew nothing came free. That night, strange visitors arrived at the restaurant. They did not order food. They sat at the tables in silence, their cloaks hiding their faces, their voices low as they spoke among themselves. They asked quiet questions. Who is the human? Why does he carry the crest? What secret does he hold? The waiter pretended not to hear, but every word sank into him. Later, when the restaurant closed, he hid the crest under his thin mattress. Sleep did not come easily. His mind kept replaying the noble's words. A debt shapes destiny. He wondered what destiny had to do with him. He was only a waiter. The next day, the warriors returned. This time, they did not laugh or mock. They sat at his tables, silent, watching. One finally spoke. If the noble protects you, maybe you are not dirt, maybe you are dangerous. His grin was cold, but his words carried something sharper than hate, fear. The human said nothing. He served them as always, his hands steady though his heart pounded. When he walked away, he heard them muttering. They were afraid of what he might become, and that fear was more dangerous than their laughter had ever been. By evening, another figure entered the restaurant, the cloaked trader who had warned him before. The human froze as the figure sat down alone, motioning him closer. The trader's voice was soft but clear. You hold a crest. That means power. Power attracts enemies. A long pause. And allies. The human swallowed hard. I didn't ask for it. No one asks for destiny, the trader replied. A gloved hand tapped the table. But now the noble house is tied to you. Others will test you. Some will try to use you. And some will try to destroy you. The waiter felt his stomach twist. Why me? The trader leaned closer, and for the first time the human saw the faint outline of eyes under the hood. Because kindness is rare. Rare things are dangerous. The trader stood and left without another word, leaving the human alone with the echo of his footsteps. Days passed, but nothing was the same. Customers treated him differently now. Some looked at him with respect, some with suspicion, some with fear. The cook no longer shouted, but avoided his gaze. The boy's smile haunted his thoughts, reminding him that his small act had saved a life, but also tied him to powers he could not control. One night, as he prepared to sleep, he heard a noise outside his storage room. A scrape against the metal door, followed by a faint whisper. He froze, holding his breath. The whisper came again, chilling his blood. The noble cannot protect you forever. He leapt to his feet, pressing against the wall, his eyes wide. The whisper faded into silence, but the message was clear. His life as a shadow was gone. He was now a piece in a game far larger than himself. And every move from here on would decide not only his fate, but perhaps something far greater. The next morning, the human waiter woke with heavy eyes. He had hardly slept, the whisper outside his door still echoing in his head. When he stepped out into the corridor, the station felt colder than usual. Guards patrolled with sharper eyes, scanning every face, and merchants hurried past as though afraid of being noticed. Rumors had spread fast. Everyone seemed to know about the crest hidden under his mattress. At the restaurant, the cook watched him with twitching antennae, saying nothing. Normally, the insectoid would bark orders, but now the silence was worse than shouting. The human moved between tables, serving as always, but he could feel the tension building. Customers whispered when he passed. Some pointed at him when they thought he was not looking. The noble's gift had made him visible, but visibility carried a price. In the middle of the day, a group of strangers entered. They were not regular customers. Their cloaks were dark, their steps heavy. They sat at a corner table, speaking in low voices. The human carried water to them, but none looked at him. When he placed the glasses down, one finally raised his head. His eyes were cold and sharp. So this is the human, he said softly in Standard, the one who carries a noble's debt. The waiter froze. His throat felt dry, but he forced himself to nod. The man's lips curled into something that was not a smile. Be careful. Debts draw storms, and storms do not care who they destroy. Then the stranger waved him away. The human returned to the kitchen quickly, but his heart would not calm. That night, as the restaurant closed, he stayed behind to clean. The cook left early, leaving him alone. The lights flickered, shadows stretching across empty tables. He was wiping down the counter when the doors slid open again. A woman in noble robes stepped inside, flanked by 2 armored guards. She carried herself with the same pride as the leader he had met before. "You are the human," she said, her voice smoother than her brother's, but just as commanding. "The one who saved my nephew." The waiter bowed his head slightly, unsure what else to do. She studied him in silence for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, her golden robe brushing the floor. "You must understand," she said, "when my brother gave you the crest, he tied you to our house. That means you are not only protected, you are watched. Every choice you make reflects on us now." Her words sank into him like heavy stones. He wanted to say he was only a waiter, that he wanted no part in noble affairs. But he remembered the boy's weak hands gripping the bowl of soup, and he could not speak those words. The woman's eyes softened for a moment. "Kindness is rare," she said. "But do not mistake it for weakness. In this galaxy, kindness can start wars. She turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she added, "Do not waste what you have been given. You will be tested soon." When the doors shut behind her, the human felt the silence crash over him like a wave. Tested soon. He could not sleep that night. The test came faster than he expected. 2 days later, chaos broke out on the station. An explosion rocked the lower docks. Sirens wailed, alarms flashing red across the corridors. The restaurant shook, plates crashing to the floor. Customers screamed, rushing for the exit. The human steadied himself against the counter, heart pounding. Through the panic, armored warriors stormed inside. Their leader pointed at him. "You, human, come with us." Fear gripped him. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "Because you are tied to the noble house," the warrior growled, "and someone wants that house broken." Before he could react, the warriors surrounded him, dragging him outside. The corridor was filled with smoke, the air heavy with the smell of fire. Alien civilians pushed past, running for safety. The human stumbled as the warriors pulled him along. His mind raced. Why him? Why now? They brought him to the docking bay. Flames burned along one wall, smoke rising high. At the center stood another group, the cloaked strangers he had seen before. Their leader stepped forward, eyes glinting. "There he is," he said, "the human with the crest." The warriors tightened their grip on him, but the cloaked leader raised a hand. "Do not kill him. Not yet. We only need proof that the noble house bows to dirt. That proof stands here." The human's chest tightened. He realized the truth. He was not a person to them. He was a weapon, a symbol to be used. If they broke him, they broke the noble family. If they raised him, they shamed others. Either way, he was no longer invisible. The cloaked leader stepped closer, his voice sharp. "You fed a child and changed your destiny. Now choose, human. Will you stand with the noble house, or will you kneel to us?" The warriors beside him waited for his answer, their hands on their weapons. Smoke swirled, alarms screamed, the station shook. The human's hands trembled, but his eyes slowly lifted. For the first time, he did not lower his gaze. His voice came out steady, though fear burned in his chest. "I kneel to no one." The words cut through the chaos like a blade. The cloaked leader's eyes narrowed, the warriors muttered, and the air seemed to grow heavier. The human waiter, once invisible, had chosen. And that choice would decide not only his own fate, but the path of the galaxy itself. The words hung in the smoky air like a challenge no one expected. The cloaked leader's eyes narrowed, and a hush fell over the docking bay. Warriors on both sides stared at the human, as if waiting for him to break. A waiter, a servant, a man who should have bowed, had instead stood tall and declared he would kneel to no one. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant wail of sirens and the crackle of flames. The cloaked leader finally laughed, low and sharp. "A human with a spine? Interesting. But bravery without power is nothing." He snapped his fingers, and two of his men stepped forward, blades drawn. The warriors guarding the human raised their own weapons, growls rumbling from their throats. The tension tightened like a rope ready to snap. The human's heart hammered, but he did not look down. He had no weapons, no armor, only his voice and the crest hidden under his thin shirt. Still, something inside him refused to bend. His words had lit a fire, and he could not put it out. Before blades could clash, a new voice boomed across the bay. "Enough!" The crowd parted as the noble leader strode in, golden robes flowing behind him. Guards surrounded him, their armor shining even in the smoke. He walked with the same calm strength as before, but his eyes burned like fire as they landed on the human. Then he turned to the cloaked strangers. "You dare use a debt to shame my house?" The cloaked leader's smirk vanished. "Your house bowed to dirt?" he spat. "We only reveal the truth." The noble's jaw tightened. "Then hear this truth. This human acted when none of us did. He gave life when others turned away. That act binds my family to him. Touch him, and you touch us." The bay erupted in murmurs. The noble had spoken not just for himself, but for his entire bloodline. The human felt the weight of those words crush down on him. He wanted to shout that he was only a waiter, not worth wars and politics, but his lips would not move. The cloaked leader glared at the noble, then at the human. "One bowl of soup," he hissed. "One act of kindness and you would change the galaxy?" He shook his head. "We will not forget this." With a sharp gesture, he and his men melted into the smoke, disappearing into the chaos of the station. The noble turned, his gaze falling once more on the human. For a moment, the air felt still, the fire and alarms fading into the background. "You are no longer invisible," he said quietly. "The galaxy sees you now, and the galaxy does not forgive." He ordered his guards to escort the human back to safety. The waiter walked in silence, his mind heavy. He had not fought, not commanded, not plotted. He had only spoken, yet his voice had changed everything. When he returned to the restaurant, the place was empty. Chairs overturned, dishes broken, smoke still clinging to the air. He sank into one of the booths, his hands covering his face. He wanted the simple days again, the days of carrying trays and being unseen. But deep inside, another part of him knew those days were gone forever. Later that night, as he lay on his mattress, he felt the weight of the crest against his chest. He had hidden it under his clothes before, but now he kept it close. It was no longer just a symbol of protection. It was a chain, binding him to forces far greater than himself. He turned it over in his hand, the silver catching the dim light, and whispered to himself, "Why me?" He did not sleep. Outside, the station buzzed with new rumors. Some said the human was a chosen figure. Others claimed he was a pawn used by nobles. And in the darkest corners, voices whispered he was dangerous, a spark that could ignite rebellion. By morning, the restaurant was full again, but the atmosphere had changed. Customers no longer ignored him. Some greeted him with respect, nodding when he passed. Others watched him with suspicion, eyes sharp, waiting for him to stumble. He felt like he was walking a thin bridge over a deep pit. One wrong step, and he would fall. As he served a table of merchants, one leaned closer and whispered, "Be careful. Too many eyes are on you. They will not all be kind." Another table of soldiers clapped him on the back, laughing. "The human who stood against cloaks. Not bad." Their cheer sounded friendly, but their eyes carried something else. A test, a measure. Everywhere he went, he felt the shift. He was no longer the invisible waiter. He was a symbol, and symbols could not hide. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the station's glass walls, the noble woman returned. She sat at a table near the center, her guards standing like statues. When the human approached, she gestured for him to sit. "You chose to stand," she said softly. "That choice will echo further than you know. Some will see you as hope, some will see you as threat. You must be ready." The waiter shook his head. "I am not ready. I never wanted this. I only gave food to a child." The noble woman's eyes softened, but her words were firm. "Kindness is not small. Kindness is power, and power demands courage." She rose, leaving him with those words heavy in his heart. As the doors closed behind her, the human sat in silence, the crest warm against his chest. He had stepped into something he did not understand, yet something told him this was only the beginning. And somewhere deep inside, past the fear, a flame burned brighter. He had been invisible once, but now the galaxy would remember his name. The station floated in silence outside the window, stars stretching endlessly in the void. Inside the restaurant, the human waiter stood alone, cleaning the last table long after closing. His hands moved slowly, mind lost in the storm of everything that had happened. The crest rested in his pocket, heavy as a stone. Once it had been simple. He had been invisible, unseen, ignored. Now every eye in the galaxy seemed to watch him. He thought of leaving. If he slipped away in the night, took a transport ship to another world, maybe he could return to being nothing. But deep down, he knew it was too late. His name was spoken in noble halls. His defiance had been carried in whispers across the docks. The cloaked ones would never stop searching, and the noble house would never release him. His kindness had become a chain, and destiny pulled tight. The doors slid open behind him. He turned quickly, tense, but it was the noble leader who entered, robes shining faintly in the dim light. No guards followed him this time. He walked slowly, like a man carrying great weight. He stopped in front of the human and studied him with steady eyes. "You have changed more than you realize," the noble said. "The cloaked ones gather allies. They want to shame us, to use you as proof that humans do not belong among us. But they made a mistake. They thought you weak. Instead, you stood." The human shook his head. "I am only a waiter." The noble's voice grew sharper. "No, you are a spark. Sparks can burn down empires, or they can light the path forward. Which one will you be?" The waiter's throat tightened. He wanted to say he was afraid, that he wanted no part in this. But the memory of the child's glowing eyes came back to him, the way he had clutched the bowl like it was life itself. That moment had mattered. And if one small act of kindness could ripple this far, maybe more acts could push even further. Before he could answer, the doors burst open again. Warriors stormed in, their armor dark, their weapons drawn. At their front was the cloaked leader, eyes burning. His voice rang out like a blade. "The galaxy will not bow to a human. Tonight it ends." The noble moved to stand between them and the human, but the waiter stepped forward instead. His hands shook, but he did not back away. The cloaked leader sneered. "What will you do, waiter? Serve us drinks? Hide behind nobles?" The human's voice came out steady, louder than he expected. "I will do what none of you will. I will care for those you throw away. I will stand when others kneel. I will not let fear decide who matters." The words spread through the room like fire. Even the noble froze, staring at him with something close to awe. The cloaked leader growled, lifting his blade, but before he could strike, guards flooded the restaurant. The noble's soldiers clashed with the intruders, steel against steel, roars and cries filling the air. The human was shoved back, chaos swirling around him. He ducked behind a table as sparks flew from clashing weapons. One warrior lunged toward him, blade raised, but before it could fall, the noble leader blocked the strike. "Go!" the noble shouted. "This is your fight now." The human's heart pounded. His fight? He had no weapon, no armor. Yet his words had already become sharper than steel. He grabbed a fallen tray, raising it against the warrior's next strike. The blow rattled his bones, but he did not fall. Another guard shoved the enemy back, and in that moment the human's eyes locked with the cloaked leader's. The leader pointed at him, snarling. "You are nothing! You cannot change what has always been!" The human stood straighter, gripping the crest in his hand until the metal cut his palm. His voice thundered across the chaos. "I already have." The battle ended quickly after. The noble's guards drove the intruders out, their cloaks vanishing into the smoke once more. The restaurant was ruined, tables broken, walls scorched, but the human still stood, breath heavy, hands trembling. The noble stepped beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "They will come again, but they will fear you now, because you chose to stand." Days passed, and word spread faster than ships. Stories told of a human waiter who defied warriors, who held the protection of nobles, who faced down cloaked assassins without bowing. Some called him a hero, some called him a threat, but no one called him invisible anymore. The restaurant filled again, but it was not the same. Customers greeted him with respect, merchants offered him small gifts, even warriors nodded when he passed. He remained quiet, serving as always, but inside he knew his life had changed. He had become a symbol, whether he wanted it or not. One night, as he lay on his mattress, the crest glowing faintly in the dark, he whispered to himself, "I was just a waiter." He closed his eyes, and a small smile touched his lips. But even a waiter can alter destiny. And somewhere beyond the station, in noble halls and shadowed rooms, his name spread further, carried on whispers that grew louder with every retelling. The invisible human had stepped into history, and the galaxy would never forget him.